application.
When you think back to Watergate, Republicans also hung in for Nixon until the very end when the tapes were released and then he lost the public. Are quotes like the ones we just heard a sign of undying loyalty or a sign that we're just not at the end yet?
No, I want to make a different point, Anna, about Republicans in the Watergate era. I think if you want to see true patriotism expressed by elected members, look at what some Republicans did during Watergate. They called on the president to resign well before the so-called smoking gun tape came out. Republicans also on the House Judiciary Committee voted to impeach Richard Nixon. And these were Republicans in districts that were pro-Nixon. And why did they do it? Because they understood they had an obligation to the Constitution of the United States that was greater than their tribal loyalty to their party. So I think that we should, I think that 1973-74 period is very useful to remind ourselves of the fact that we Americans can be more than just partisans. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the Republicans who are saying the things that they are today are going to rue this day later on, should more material, more damaging material about the president come to light.
I mean, one senior Republican aide explained it to CNN, the lack of speaking out, the relative silence or kind of brushing things to the side, saying, quote, everyone will move on to the next huge cataclysmic thing in like 3 hours. Why burn down the relationship when the president is going to dramatically shift the topic in a matter of hours? Do you think Trump is better at changing the conversation than Nixon ever was? And what do you make of that explanation from Republicans currently that, just give it a few minutes, give it another hour?
Two excellent questions. First answer, Donald Trump is much better than Richard Nixon at changing the subject. Richard Nixon reacted to the Saturday Night Massacre when he fired the special prosecutor by withdrawing. Some of his closest aides described him as incommunicado after late 1973. Donald Trump is the opposite. We're getting more and more Trump, not less and less Trump. So in that sense, Mr. Trump is better at it. The other is an issue about what matters most. These Republican leaders, by the way, not all Republicans are acting this way, but these leaders that are saying, well, why should we bother because the public will forget, they should remember that their obligation is to the Constitution of the United States. Their obligation is not to any given president. So they have a much higher loyalty, and that loyalty requires, I believe, that they stand up for the rule of law and that they talk about the importance of our institutions and of an independent judiciary. Those are things that they should be doing anyway, regardless of whether or not the American people remember a certain crisis or scandal.
Timothy Naftali, thanks so much for being with us. Word that a true American hero, Senator John McCain, is refusing further treatment in his battle with cancer. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who's spoken to senators and the doctors of Senator...
I'll think of his name in a minute. He said, I always knew that no one could live forever, but I thought there might be one exception.
That reminds me.
So you gotta have joy. Listen, those joyful memories of the campaign in 2000 are some of the most enjoyable times of my life. We were the underdogs. We were fighting our way up. We went to Sedona. You remember? I mean, everything was so magic about that campaign. And I'm very grateful for having the opportunity. Remember, I'm the guy that stood 5th from the bottom of his class at the Naval Academy.
My last question for you, and I hope I don't run this clip for another 50 years, but how do you want the American people to remember you?
He served his country, and not always right. Made a lot of mistakes, made a lot of errors, but served his country, and I hope we could add honorably.
Indeed. For more on the difficult decision made by McCain and his family, let's turn to CNN's Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay?
Well, we know this is probably one of the toughest decisions a patient's family, the doctors all collectively make, deciding to stop treatment. But it's a conversation that is probably happening almost since the time of diagnosis. Senator McCain was diagnosed back in July of last year, so it's been now some 13 months since the diagnosis of his glioblastoma, or GBM. This is an aggressive brain cancer. This is the type of brain cancer that starts in the brain as opposed to starting somewhere else in the body and spreading to the brain. And I can tell you, I started my training in neurosurgery 25 years ago, and we really haven't made much progress overall in terms of being able to increase survival from this tumor. It's a very aggressive tumor. So almost from the beginning, the conversations are, what is the treatment options and how likely are they to benefit me? And at some point, you sort of get to the point where you say, look, maybe the treatment options aren't actually working, or maybe they're just too toxic for my body to be able to tolerate anymore, and my tumor continues to grow. And that's a very, very tough, difficult conversation to have. We know that Senator Kaine likely had a seizure last week. He may have been declining over this past week, and then with his family probably helping him make this decision now to forego therapy. We don't know.
O'clock Eastern, 2 in the afternoon out west. I'm Ana Cabrera in New York. You are live in the CNN newsroom. We start with a visibly aggravated president dealing with negative stories, legal entanglements, and friends getting immunity from prosecutors. Today, he's lashing out at the head of the Justice Department. Again, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, saying that Sessions, quote, doesn't understand what is happening underneath his command position. The president goes on to say highly conflicted Bob Mueller and his gang of 17 angry Dems are having a field day as real corruption goes untouched. No collusion. The president also hammered the FBI for not doing enough, in his opinion, to investigate Hillary Clinton's emails. And here's the key quote: "At some point, I might have to get involved." Joining us now is CNN legal analyst Michael Zeldin, who served as special assistant to Robert Mueller at the Justice Department, and Ken Blackwell, former Ohio Secretary of State and advisor to the Trump transition team. Michael, let me start with you. Is the president publicly instructing the Attorney General on how to redirect DOJ investigative resources, specifically away from Trump's inner circle, onto people he sees as political adversaries? Is that your interpretation of those tweets?
Well, it can be read that way. You know, the president has the prerogative to set the priorities for the Justice Department, so he is entitled in some respect to set those priorities. But really, this seems more directed at Sessions' failure to control Mueller. And that's something that the president has no control over, short of firing Mueller, and Sessions is recused from. So these are really rants against Sessions, almost, you know, inexplicably, because the president can fire Sessions if he wants to. Theoretically, he can fire Mueller. He has it within his power to do so. So, you know, in some sense, put up or shut up. Either move in the way you want to move or stop, you know, this complaining.
Ken, what's your take? How do you make sense of the president's comments?
Well, look, there has been no one more successful than Jeff Sessions in moving the president's agenda, whether it's religious liberty or immigration or reining in uncontrolled regulations on capital formation. Look, but at the end of the day, Jeff Sessions has been fighting against some pretty strong political headwinds. So I think the president is probably between a rock and a hard place, because Michael skipped over Rubenstein. Rubenstein has control.
Rosenstein, the deputy attorney general.
That's right. Excuse me, Rosenstein. Rosenstein has the authority over Mueller, but
right.
he in fact is not acting. If the president wanted to fire Rosenstein, Sessions, then who runs the Justice Department? There's a prescribed order, and it has to be somebody in a confirmable position, and that just hands over the whole state. The whole AG's operation, the Justice Department, to the deep state or the administrative state, and that would cause more headaches than not. This is about an agenda.
That's not correct, because the succession order goes from the Attorney General to the Deputy Attorney General, to the Associate Attorney General, also a politically appointed position, to the Solicitor General, also a politically appointed position. So in order for you to get to career people running the Department of Justice, you got to fire 6 or 8 people, and
who's
that
in
is
that third
not going to
position,
happen.
Michael, who's in that third position right now?
The Associate Attorney General, I don't know who.
There's
who's
nobody.
in that position.
nobody's there. And why would you turn?
But hold on just a second, guys.
Why would you turn the operation over to the Solicitor General when he's running your defense?
Let me
across
ask you,
the,
though,
the whole
Ken,
department.
what I'm
That would
hearing
be
you say,
foolish.
though, is this really is all about the Russia investigation, and the president doesn't like that Jeff Sessions doesn't have control of the Russia investigation. He wants somebody who is completely loyal to him personally to be in charge, because the Russia investigation has to do with his political campaign. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
No, the president is not going to get rid of Jeff Sessions. At the end of the day, his agenda is larger than Mueller's investigation. The Mueller investigation is a frustration. But look, this president is a fighter. And so he is not going to follow the traditional path. He's going to push back. He's going to push back verbally. He's going to engage in the public arena. And that sort of frustrates, folks who are used to the regular order. It is not the regular order.
Well, but the problem is that he has created a mess for himself, which is all these railings against Sessions for failing to rein in Mueller, and the threat that he's going to fire him because of his failure to rein in Mueller creates the situation for him that if he does do that, then he'll start being looked at for obstructionist or abuse of power behavior. He's made a terrible bed for himself. If he had kept quiet, he could have exercised his constitutional prerogatives to fire